Thank you very much. You know, I'm always excited to come back to India when I think about geos to go to, whether it be Europe, other parts of Asia Pac, Latin America. But can anybody guess why I'm always excited to come here to India? My title is Chief Developer Advocate. If I'm the Chief Developer Advocate, where do I want to be? I want to be in the fastest growing geography of developers. And in this room, I'm sitting in it right now. You know, it also means that you have the largest concentration of builders and innovators, and many of you are going to, again, be directly in this room. As Ginny mentioned, 4 million, it's about 5.2 million developers out of 23 million developers around the world are here in India, but you've doubled year after year. So the concentration and the amount of innovation that's going to come out of this region, I just know is going to be phenomenal. But I'm going to call out the type of problem solving that I'm looking and challenging each of you in this room to build as we move forward. Because we saw some good examples here from the entire spectrum. From one side, you have companies like Flipkart, Uber, where software used to be the things that supported businesses. Now, in this generation, the software is the business. And it's the business so much that it's disrupting traditional industries. So the one side of the spectrum is you as an innovator and startup developer can go about and essentially challenge the large companies, upset whole industries, and essentially actually be part of that new economy that is really this disruptor. Then there's this other side where KSV actually talked about a big innovation inside of the India community here was adoption of Java. And Java is still the most popular development language in our industry today. But if you take a look at where it's going, the first generation of Java developers were based upon an architecture that was based upon the app server. Of course, web server was one of those. JBoss was another one of those. But there's this entire amount of systems that we actually have today that many of the developers here in India helped create. And those are essentially those applications as we know of today. But what I'm looking for many of you in this room is to be the first generation of cloud native Java developers, the ones who know mastery of essentially microservices, containers, service mesh, and fabrics, essentially for this next generation of development that's going to come about. So in the business side, you can choose to be a disruptor, starting in startups. I've done 3 startups myself. Or you can come to the enterprise and essentially disrupt and innovate in an environment that has to move tremendously. Now let me tell you how much it has to move. How many of you have a smartphone? Okay, what I know is many of you, all of you have a smartphone. And if you think about it, the iPhone launched 12 years ago. And in that 12-year period, what do they talk about in terms of Apple? That Apple's business in terms of the iPhone is slowing down. Why is that? Because of a point of saturation. Everybody who needs a smartphone basically has a smartphone. And that's only taken 12 years to do. AWS, the first cloud-based service, launched 2 years earlier than that. Cloud is 14 years old. If you look at the large clients, the systems, the banks, the transportation systems, the airlines, how much of cloud has been adopted across that fabric right now? Only about 20%. There's 80% of that technology that still actually has to move over to the cloud. And so what the opportunity is in relation to that is because, again, it's hard. And what you heard today here is that you're not just coders, but you're problem solvers and innovators. And so while there'll be a community that will start up and disrupt, there will be also a community that will take the hardest, most complex applications in our enterprises today and essentially modernize them to this new cloud-native platform. And I'm also looking, again, for a disproportionate amount of this room to be part of that first generation of, again, cloud-native Java developers, going from J2EE to Jakarta EE and bringing the whole industry actually along those lines. Now, look, we oftentimes talk about how we solve business problems, not complex business problems along these lines. You know, interestingly enough, the video that you saw was of something that I'm going to talk about that we launched last year called Call for Code, and the related program that we launched this year. But just in Kerala, as Sriram actually talked about, there was a tremendous amount of flooding in August just of last year. Of course, all of you actually know that. 2.5 billion people are impacted by natural disasters every year. That means that it's one of society's most pressing issues. In Kerala alone, there was 220,000 people displaced from their homes. And it's because in that environment, 40% greater rainfall happened in that region, but happened in such a concentrated amount of time. Now here's the interesting part, again, in this whole dynamic of the developers I see in this room, the problems that we see in natural disasters, is there's no technology that can stop a natural disaster from happening. But there's a tremendous amount of things that we can do to prepare, to deal with, and to recover from the natural disasters. And when you think about it, last year, we launched an open source initiative called Call for Code. IBM said, I'm going to put $30 million, 5-year investment, and instead of taking technology and applying it to the business world, we're going to make an open competition and challenge the 23 million developers, essentially, to solve the problems and reduce human loss and loss of property associated with natural disasters. So again, you know, interestingly enough, just the way people basically think about things as a developer. If I ask you to learn a tool, I'll get some of you basically coming along that ride. If I ask you to solve a problem, I have a disproportionate amount of you guys jumping in. Now, in India, how attractive is that? The problem solver, the innovator, the one who really bites into something very, very hard. Call for Code was a wildly successful program last year. We did it in conjunction with the Linux Foundation, the American Red Cross, the United Nations Human Rights, and the project creator, David Clark. In the span of from May to October, 4 months, we had 100,000 developers participate. We had over 156 countries submit submissions in relation to the competition. And we had over 2,500 actual candidates that we had to sit through. 100,000 developers. How many of those developers do you think came from this region, India itself? Nearly 50% of the people in India came from India, 100,000, because I believe the curiosity, the goodwill, the motivation to apply technology to good, and the density of developers was the reason why we had that much concentration in it. So it's very exciting, essentially, for us to talk about Call for Code. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the program actually is this year. But I want you guys to get a sense for the types of people who jumped in and competed in this. We had 3 finalists. And we're lucky enough to have one of those finalists here. The team that was PD3R, Alistair and Shubes. I'm going to ask essentially that you come up to stage after we watch a short video.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alistair Norris, and I'd firstly like to thank IBM on behalf of Build Change for inviting us to come and speak today. So, I'm the Risk and Resilience Program Manager at Build Change Nepal, and I oversee the current programs in the country, as well as the technological innovations that allow us to improve construction, but also reduce risk in the country. Subhash, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Subhash Jisip from Nepal, and I'm currently working as a Build Change Nepal as an application developer that helps to save the life of the people in the disaster-affected areas in different countries like Nepal, Indonesia, Colombia, etc. And I was the part of the team that participated in Call for Code competition.
Great. So Subhash, my understanding is you were present in Nepal during the earthquake. What was your experience of that event?
As natural disasters are unexpected, it can come anytime, and we are very terrified, and then we have to take the shelter under the table and save our life anyhow. And after shaking has been stopped, we went to the food stall for safety, because that was the safest place we found. But there was large scale of destruction, devastation, and everything was affected. And many people were homeless because their house was not safe enough. And
so the team decided to create some solutions to help the people of Nepal. What did you decide to develop to do this?
Our solution was to train the AI model to perform the analysis from the house of the people, and then for that we used IBM code pattern image classification using convolutional neural network. We use that pattern, and then we train the AI model by using the different programming language. Python, mainly we use the Python language, and then its libraries to train data, and then form the model. And then we also use the other technology like its framework, Flask framework, to provide the API to our mobile. And we use Java language for the Android app development. And then we also hosted that the PD3R project in the GitHub for accessibility, and it can be open source so that we can get input from the many developers in the community, and then we can improve our project in the future to provide the better solution to our problem, that the house owner can determine that their house can be retrofitted or not, or maybe their house is safe or not.
Right. So for the AI to distinguish which houses are retrofitting candidates or not, we need to identify whether that house conforms to certain rules. And so they're things like where are the openings located and what are the sizes of those openings, and the layout of the house. And initially, so the plan to do this was to use 3D modeling software that allowed us to compute iterations of different configurations of houses to train the AI across hundreds of thousands of images, so that we could teach it what was a go and what was a no-go in terms of retrofitting. So as you see here, it's an example of retrofitting, and it's a way that we can preserve an existing building by strengthening the building from within. So we build reinforced concrete columns and beams, connect these to the walls and the floor to create a solid building to act as one. And in Nepal, we're assisting people to seismically retrofit their buildings by creating pre-engineered type designs that can be adapted to different houses and different situations. But to do this, we need to have specific information. So we use this application, which we provide to homeowners, to get information on the type of building, the materials used, the layout, and the damage. And then the homeowner is able to input this information, and then they can input their contact information. So we know who they are, where they're located, and we're able to get in touch with them at a future point in time. The next step in this process is for the homeowner to upload photos of their house. So they need to upload photos from all different sides of the building. And these need to be clear so that the artificial intelligence can easily work out whether the building is retrofittable or not. And so we'll see here this homeowner is doing this, and then in a second they'll submit all this information to the application. and then they will get an immediate response as to whether this particular building is retrofittable or not. And so here it is. And so what we'll see now is just an example of a retrofit in action. So here we have homeowners who are working on a particular retrofit. And this goes all the way from sort of taking the building, retrofitting it, and you'll see it in progress in a second, to the finished article. And then we'll hear a homeowner's testimony of their retrofit. So we'll just let this run. So that gives us what we've done as part of the call for code and using the solutions with the help of IBM. However, these solutions, they provide we can give the homeowner immediate advice post an event. And this allows them to reconstruct their buildings quickly and get back to normality. It also allows the government to find out the scale and the extent of potential retrofitting within the country and create policy that makes sense based on full information. However, the potential is actually much greater. Some more stats for you in advance, in addition to Willie's, is that 5 million people lost their homes due to hurricanes and earthquakes in the last decade. And this is totally avoidable. The cost for a retrofit is about 20 to 30% of the cost of rebuilding a home after an earthquake. Yet, why don't we do this? 3 billion people, according to World Bank, will live in substandard housing by 2030. That's more than double where we are today. As a community, we need to act. We need to do something about this. And so through things like the call for code, for example, we've rapidly developed a solution which can be put into any country in a quick way to identify the vulnerability of existing buildings and compare the costs between strengthening versus doing nothing. And we can look at that in terms of lives lost, the financial loss, but also the social impact. And with something we've started to do in our program in Colombia, where actually most of the Call for Code team are present at the moment, we're looking at how does this link to prevention, and how can we take the Call for Code solutions that we've developed and put that into a preventative context so that Colombia is ready before the next earthquake strikes. And that's sort of what I'd like you all to take away from this is, technologically, we can avoid the photos we've seen. We can avoid the situation that we've seen in the pool. It's just now up to us to prevent these future events becoming the disasters that we're used to seeing. So if you'd like any more information or speak to us about Call for Code or the solutions we've created or anything else, there's a Call for Code booth out in the foyer, and we'll be there for the rest of the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Alice, thank you so much. Really. Okay, so Call for Code exceeded our wildest expectations. And as I mentioned, it is a 5-year initiative, so we're in the 2nd year of that initiative. The program actually will be open and run from March to October this year. The prize for Call for Code is $200,000. 10 of the top projects will be submitted into the Linux Foundation as projects so they can live on and take advantage of the community evolving and continuing to build on those types of solutions. But what we saw off of the success that we had this year was that it wasn't enough. You know, we didn't want to stop with a coding competition because the depth and breadth of what we saw in terms of the solutions just amazed some of the most illustrious judges we had looking at Call for Code. So this year, we announced a sister program that then takes the winners of Call for Code, in this case, the winner of Call for Code, and sees it all the way down to implementation. We're investing another $25 million into this program so that we can see the actual deployment and hope to see many of these technologies at work in action. And partnering with IBM and something that we call the Corporate Services Core, we're working with ourselves as well as our partners such as AT&T FirstNet, as well as local governments, and seeing how these technologies can really reduce human suffering and the safe of property. I had a team just last week down in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The winner of Call for Code was a team called Project Owl. And their solution was a marrying of hardware and software. And essentially, it dealt with one of the first issues that comes up whenever you have a natural disaster, which is that communication grid goes down. So the ability to put up an ad hoc communication grid very quickly and then have it service first responders and victims of the natural disaster was essentially the solution set. A team of IBMers, along with that Project Owl team, went down to San Juan to actually do a pilot deployment in conjunction with the government of Puerto Rico. As a participant and a winner that's part of Call for Code, that's what you can look forward to. This additional investment that we're calling Code and Response will allow you to work with my team to help fortify and scale your solution, work with organizations and deployment partners, and then travel all over the world to see those deployments. It may be here in India, it may be somewhere else in the world. Lastly, that this year, we're going to have a competition specifically for India, Call for Code India. And the winner not only actually gets into the consideration for the final prize, but that winning team, we will fly to our global celebration in October. So I'm looking for all of you, number one, to take a look at how you can disrupt the businesses. Lots of startups, innovative ideas. Number two, I'm looking for you to transform the industry and be part of one of the first generation cloud-native Java developers. And the third, I'm going to have you use your developer and data science skills and powers to apply technology for good and answer the call and join Call for Code for 2019. And last but not least, I'm going to ask my partner in crime, Priya, to come in to tell us what the rest of the day is involved for us. And I'm going to ask and challenge you to say, what will you build today? How will you innovate? And again, I enjoy tremendously being here in India every time. And then the next time I'm here, which will be next year, I'm looking forward to this being not just the fastest growing developer growth community, but being the largest developer growth community next year. So let's welcome Priya, and then thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.